In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where houses looked almost identical and lawns were trimmed to perfection, there lived a young woman named Emily. She was 22, studying part-time and working evenings to pay for her classes. Emily wasn't the type to draw attention to herself. She minded her own business, paid her rent on time, and rarely spoke to anyone outside of a polite wave when she passed her neighbors. But in this neighborhood, there was one person who always seemed to notice Emily's every move, the infamous HOA board member, Karen. Karen was the kind of woman who believed the neighborhood belonged to her. She patrolled the streets like a self-appointed sheriff, looking for any tiny reason to hand out violation slips. If someone's grass grew an inch too long, Karen reported it. If a car was parked a few inches over the line, Karen snapped pictures and sent angry emails. People hated her but tolerated her because she had been on the HOA board for years and thrived on the little power she had, and lately Karen's focus had turned toward Emily. One Saturday evening, Emily decided to celebrate her best friend's birthday. It wasn't a wild party, just a handful of close friends, a cake, some music in the background, and laughter. The music wasn't even that loud. Emily had made sure of it, keeping the volume low out of respect for the neighbors. But apparently, even the sound of happiness was too much for Karen. The very next morning, Emily found an envelope taped to her door. Inside was a notice from the HOA accusing her of hosting an unauthorized gathering that disturbed the peace of the community. Emily rolled her eyes. She hadn't broken any rule, but she also knew Karen wouldn't let this go easily. She ignored it, thinking it wasn't worth her energy, but Karen wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, more notices appeared on Emily's door. Each one more ridiculous than the last: improper trash placement, grass not trimmed to HOA standards, decorative lights not approved by board. Emily knew these were exaggerations, maybe even fabrications, but she was too busy with her work and studies to argue with an HOA obsessed with control. And then, things took a darker turn. On a quiet Thursday evening, Emily was sitting by her window reading a book when she noticed flashing lights outside. A police car pulled up to her driveway, followed by another. Her heart sank as 2 uniformed officers stepped out and walked to her door. She opened it cautiously. "Ma'am," one officer said politely, "we received a complaint about possible illegal activity at this residence. We need to take a look." Emily was shocked. "Illegal activity? What are you talking about? I live here alone. I study, I work. What could possibly be illegal?" But the officers explained that an anonymous tip claimed there were drugs and suspicious gatherings happening at her home. Emily knew instantly where this had come from. She took a deep breath, steadied her nerves, and stepped aside. "Go ahead, search whatever you need. I have nothing to hide." The police entered, searching every room. Emily stayed calm, even though her hands trembled slightly. While the officers moved through her small home, she discreetly pulled out her phone and began recording. She wanted proof of what was happening. After a thorough check, the officers returned to the living room looking slightly embarrassed. "There's nothing here." One of them admitted, "Everything looks normal." Emily asked carefully, "Do you mind telling me who made the complaint?" The officer shook his head. "I can't give names, ma'am, but let's just say we've had calls from your neighborhood association before." That was all Emily needed to hear. She thanked the officers for their professionalism, and once they left, she sat down with her phone still recording and whispered to herself. She crossed the line. The next morning, Emily made an appointment with a lawyer. She explained everything: the harassment notices, the baseless complaints, and now a false police report. The lawyer nodded as she spoke. "What Karen did is serious. Filing a false police report isn't just an HOA violation, it's a criminal offense, and you have video evidence to show you cooperated fully and had nothing illegal in your home. We can build a strong case." For the first time, Emily felt hope. She wasn't just a quiet tenant anymore. She was ready to stand up for herself. Weeks later, the HOA scheduled a community meeting. These meetings were usually boring affairs where board members argued about budgets and landscaping. But this time, Emily showed up with a quiet confidence. She sat near the front, her phone ready in her hand. Karen sat across the room with her usual smug look, acting as though she still ran the show. When the time came for residents to bring up concerns, Emily raised her hand. "I need to address something important," she began. Her voice was steady, but there was fire behind her words. "For weeks, I've been targeted with violation notices that had no basis, and last month the police came to my home because of a false complaint made against me, a complaint that wasted their time, humiliated me in front of my neighbors, and put me in danger of being wrongfully arrested." Murmurs filled the room. Emily tapped her phone and played the recording. The sound of the police officer's voice echoed through the room. "There's nothing here. Everything looks normal. We've had calls from your neighborhood association before." Gasps erupted. People turned to Karen, whose face had gone pale. Emily looked straight at her. This wasn't about rules. This was about harassment. This was about someone abusing their position in the HOA to make my life miserable. Karen tried to interrupt, but Emily raised her voice. "If you had a problem with me, you could have spoken to me directly. Instead, you lied to law enforcement. That's not just cruel, it's illegal." The lawyer who had accompanied Emily stood up. "For the record, we are pursuing legal action for defamation, harassment, and filing a false police report. And I recommend this board take immediate action to remove the individual responsible before the entire association becomes liable." The room went silent. Then, slowly, one neighbor after another began to speak. "She's right. Karen has been after me about my mailbox color for years. She fined me over a garden gnome. She threatened to tow my car because it was parked 6 inches over the line." The floodgates opened. Everyone had a story, and every story pointed back to Karen. Her reign of petty tyranny was over. The board had no choice. That very night, they voted to strip Karen of her HOA position and fine her for misconduct. For once, Karen had no words. She gathered her papers, read, faced and trembling, and stormed out of the room. Emily sat back, a small smile on her lips. She hadn't wanted to fight, but when pushed too far, she learned something powerful, that knowing your rights and standing firm could make even the loudest bullies go silent. Weeks later, as Emily walked through the neighborhood, something had changed. Neighbors waved more warmly. Some even stopped to thank her for speaking up. The air felt lighter, as though the entire community had been freed from a shadow. And though she never sought revenge, Emily found satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served. In the end, she realized a simple truth. Sometimes the quiet ones aren't weak. They're just patient. And when they finally decide to speak, their voice carries more weight than years of intimidation. Her story became a reminder to everyone in that little suburban neighborhood. Never underestimate someone who knows their rights, and never abuse power just because you think you can get away with it. Because eventually, the truth comes out, and when it does, it's unstoppable.